Greetings fellow Whovians and welcome to Timey Wimey Review. With the Doctor Who 60th anniversary celebrations well underway, there is actually one, like a party, that wants to just gate crash as well. Something that's not official as part of the celebration of 60 years of Doctor Who, but it did arrive on Channel 5 in the UK not too long after the episode of Doctor Who The Star Beast, and that is the documentary The Secrets and Scandals of Doctor Who. When I first heard that this documentary was going to happen on Channel 5, I was a little bit skeptical because one, the My5 streaming app is terrible at updating on my TV, so it took me ages to get that sorted. And second of all, I knew they weren't going to have much sort of official videos or clips or sort of even just sort of the facts as well. It could have been a bit sort of blurry in terms of the information that they were going to dish out. To me, it reminds me of the annuals, Christmas annuals. Doctor Who, for example, you go to a shop and they'll have the official Doctor Who annual, and then you go to like maybe a cheaper shop and there's the unofficial version. That's what I kind of feel sometimes about the Channel 5 documentaries. So, is this one worth watching? What secrets and scandals were revealed on this documentary? Please hit the subscribe button. That will really help out this channel as I try and reach my target of 450 subscribers by the end of the year. Let's review the secrets and scandals of Doctor Who. This documentary started off quite softly in its approach, talking about stuff that many Whovians might have known already, and that was kind of the level of violence in Doctor Who, particularly going into the 80s. They were sort of more concentrating on. They did mention the cliffhanger to part 3 of The Deadly Assassin, the classic Tom Baker story, and that they had to re-edit that for further repeats because of the complaints that was made at that time, particularly with Mary Whitehouse being on board as well. So they mentioned her and her Doctor Who sort of legacy, I suppose. And also, yeah, like I said, they also really went into more the 80s side of that. Particularly the interesting clip that they used was from Revelation of the Daleks, with the character of Arthur Stengos, who was half human, half mutated in this plastic casting of, or glass casting of the Dalek. So basically he was being converted into a Dalek, and Natasha, his daughter, managed to break in, and he basically asked her to kill her, basically euthanizing this person, and obviously broaching the subject of euthanasia in Doctor Who. So yeah, I think that's a fair point to add, really, with it still obviously Doctor Who is a family show. They've got to sort of be quite carefully on this one. I love that scene. I have reviewed Revelation of the Daleks. If you do want to check that out on the Timeline Review YouTube channel. And yeah, and that's a sort of another debate of another day, but fair point in the sort of terms of the level of violence that happened in the classic era. The next segment was about stunts going wrong, and again, it was been stuff that's been talked about before. The most notable one, or the infamous one, is the accident that nearly happened for poor Sophie Aldred when they were filming Battlefield in that water tank. I won't go into too much details here because again, it's on my channel, it's on my review of Battlefield, and yeah, it's a tale as old as time. But suffice to say, Sylvester McCoy was an absolute hero, and I'm glad that obviously Sophie Aldred is fine and well after that stunt. But yes, it was also talking about other stunts that kind of went a bit wrong, or a little bit, let's say, in terms of health and safety, would not happen now. They did, to be fair, I did mention at the beginning of this video that I was a bit sort of skeptical of who they managed to get to speak on this documentary, but they did manage to get quite a few Doctor Who legends, as well as sort of TV experts and sort of producers and writers for various sort of TV ones. So from the past companions, we had Nicola Bryant, Mark Strickson, Fraser Hines, Sophie Aldred, stuntman Stuart Fell, the technical guy that created K9, as well as other sort of Doctor Who props, the legend that is Matt Irvine, Andrew Cartmel, who was the last script editor for Doctor Who, it is so in the Sylvester McCoy tenure from 88 to 89. Ian Levine, the wonderful Ian Levine, and also Mark Barton Hill, who was a Dalek operator in the modern era of Doctor Who. He was in the episode Asylum of the Daleks, where there was some problems being inside the Dalek. I can't remember the exact story on there, but yeah, it's it kind of basically reflecting that stunts can go wrong even if you are a Dalek operator as well. Things can go beyond your control, but I think lessons has been learned. Or I'd like to say lessons have been learned. It's it is a dangerous profession. If we've definitely seen the recent documentary from the Harry Potter and the poor stunt double for Daniel Radcliffe, that is an amazing documentary, very fascinating documentary. I do recommend that you check that out. Back to this documentary, it also talked about just again these things that would just not fly at all, or I like to think so, in terms of filming for Doctor Who, with, like I said, Mark Strickson, who played Turlo. Obviously he had a bit of a dice of death with a stunt when he was filming Enlightenment. Nicola Bryant had a bit of a tough time when obviously in their first couple of stories, Planets of Fire, there was in Lanzarote, nice and warm, and then for Case of Androzani, they were back in the UK in Poole, very very freezing cold, and wearing very summery type clothes, basically quite tight clothes. And with that particular one, and when Nicola Bryant was being interviewed, she was having frostbite. There was parts of her skin coming off her feet, and also sort of pretty much had a case of pneumonia as well. So it's sad that these things have happened, and it's very bizarre that these things happened in the first place. Like I said, I hope lessons had been learned. The next segment went on into full-on sex and scandal, basically, which I knew this was going to come up. Obviously, fans, especially fans of the classic Who, we've seen obviously the talk about the one for the dads in terms of former companions. So, for example, Leela, and as aforementioned, Perry, Nicola Bryant, wearing not that much. Obviously, her opening debut story, she was just in a bikini. I get it. It's a very different time back then. I understand that they were going for that kind of sex appeal with it being a Saturday afternoon, but it's still a family show, and it's a bit weird. I do sort of see that as a reflection of, let's say, the women's division in WWE. 20 years ago, we had bra and panties matches and lingerie matches, and now, the women are treated equally in the men in terms of match stipulation. So I feel that this is kind of like a similar sort of thing here. And they were also going on about, oh my God, and some of this I did know going into this documentary, and some of it I didn't know. So, for example, there was a lot of straight to video type of productions in the wilderness years with characters, from cast members of Doctor Who being different characters, but sort of like, from the makers or creators of Doctor Who, or we've got these people from Doctor Who, we've done these types of shows. Some of it was affiliated with Doctor Who, such as I remember there was one with the Autons and Unit, and a few sort of like, they weren't allowed to say the characters, but you kind of knew who they were. The other one that they used for this clip in this documentary, I think it was called The Survivors, which starred Colin Baker and Sophie Aldred. And there was a scene that they used, or a clip that we used, where Colin and Sophie were top half naked. You didn't see anything, but you can tell that they were not clothed they were basically naked in Wookiee Hole, in this cave, and Sophie covered in some green paint as well. And it was, sort of like the sexual undertones going on there. And then there was another clip actually where Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant was having a full-on snogging session. I know that there weren't being the Sixth Doctor and Perry, the companion Perry, but it was very weird to see. It just, yeah, not. It was just very weird to see. Nicola did mention that Colin Baker was a bit sort of put out in terms of that scene, even though they were just acting and getting on with it. But yeah, it was very odd fan fiction being sort of unleashed on this documentary. I think I'll leave that for a story for another time, because it is a fascinating look into sort of the sauciness of Doctor Who that I'll like to explore later at some point on this channel. We also talked about sort of sex outside of Doctor Who in terms of Patrick Troughton basically leading a double life and having two sets of families, and which Fraser Hines was mentioning. The only time that he caught wind of this was Patrick was giving him a lift back home, but went back to his secret family on the way to give him some a brown envelope, so I'm assuming some money. That is something that I didn't know of. Again, it's not for me to speculate or opinionate on that life. It happened. It's, you know, it's not a reflection on Patrick's work as the Doctor. It's, you know, it's sad for probably all involved, but it's his life, it's his business. That's all I can say on that subject. And then there was also kind of touching upon the sexism that happened in Doctor Who. Of, you know, companions making the tea, for example, or making coffee, and, you know, being more there for like a sex object rather than an actual fully fleshed character. Again, I understand that, and you know, I'm definitely an advocate of Doctor Who being a progressive show. Again, it was a different time, it was a different era, different tastes. And again, it's something that will just never fly now, I don't think. It's gone totally the other way. And they did sort of touch upon this in like a short sentence of like, you know, and again, sort of like what I was thinking by terms of women wrestling, for example. But they said that yes, obviously there's a lot more sort of fleshed out characters to the point that we now have our first female Doctor in Jodie Whittaker. There was a bit of backlash from that, but yeah, at least we've done that. So it's a shame that the documentary didn't give a bit more of a balanced view in terms of the sexism of Doctor Who and how it's become more progressive, leading up to the first ever female Doctor, which was fantastic for the show. It was just more, nope, let's get on with some more scandals. The segment that carried on from this documentary was about Longley, which was what I was kind of trying to research into when I was reviewing the Five Doctors as part of the 60th anniversary celebrations of Doctor Who. And yeah, they pretty much touched on, it was kind of the Woodstock of Doctor Who, but it was more the 1999 Woodstock of Doctor Who rather than the more famous fun one. Where the BBC sort of pretty much messed up in terms of how popular they thought this exhibition was going to be. They expected 20,000 people at the weekend, but it was 3 times as much. It was 60,000 there at the weekend and stuck in queues and not having a great time. So they kind of touched on that and then jumped into sort of John Nathan Turner's era in Doctor Who as the production manager, producer, and how he was kind of like a king amongst the fans, but then the fans turned on him. Kind of talking, you know, kind of taking too much sort of opinions from the fans as well, and sort of kind of like the Twitter of the 1980s, I would say. There was a little bit of a talk on here about how he allegedly spoke to Doctor Who fans and invited them for drinks at in one of the BBC offices, and maybe some kind of sexual um, episode happened. This was all alleged. There was the writer for the John Nathan Turner's biopic. He was part of this documentary and said he found no evidence of that. but really he shouldn't have got himself involved in a situation like this, given his status as the producer for Doctor Who. Expanding on the sort of fandom in terms of like how the fans do have a love-hate relationship with Doctor Who. We've all seen it, especially on Twitter or X. It's there all the time. There's Facebook groups out there that can be absolutely in love with the show and then just go on full on rabid hatred for the show. It's sad that it happens. I'm trying to be a more positive look on things, especially for this channel. I want it to be sort of, discuss the things that didn't work. Absolutely, I wouldn't say just sweep it under the carpet, because that's, I'm all up for debate and conversations. But yeah, it can get taken to the extreme. They obviously show the infamous clip of Chris Chibnall criticising the show on the programme Open Air. Boy, did that sort of come round full circle 30 or 40 years later for Mr. Chibnall. But yeah, it's kind of like they touched upon these subjects, I felt, in this documentary, but didn't really overly explore it. It was just sort of like just a dumper truck of information. There you go. Let's move on to the next scandal or next secret. Again, I would like to touch upon more in a future video for this channel is the stories that have been missing in the BBC archives, and sort of basically how the reasoning why they junked so much, not just Doctor Who, but lots of BBC programs and dramas and comedies. Dad's Army, for example, also suffered the same fate as some of the classic 60s stories from Doctor Who. It was just too big to store and too expensive to store these videotapes or these film cells, so they basically wiped them to be reused again or junked them. And that's where sort of Ian Levine was involved in this documentary, and sort of talking about how he managed to rescue the Daleks, for example. And yeah, it's kind of sad these things have happened, from the sexism, from the sort of the weird sort of sex sort of things that happened, the fans backlash, stunts that gone wrong, all of that. I'd say it was, I don't think it was a totally unbalanced documentary. It was just there to give you a whirlwind tour of all the sort of the stuff that you didn't know about Doctor Who, that doesn't really get talked about or want to be celebrated. There were certainly bits that I didn't know from this, particularly the survivors scene with Colin Baker and Sophie Aldred, or the kissing scene with Nicola Bryant or Colin Baker. Patrick Troughton as well. I didn't know anything about that, or the sort of John Nathan Turner alleged stuff. Still very much alleged. So just to make that perfectly clear, no evidence has come to light in terms of that particular scandal. But yeah, it's sad that these things happen. And it has happened plenty of times throughout Doctor Who, and especially even modern era Doctor Who. They haven't been totally squeaky clean with certain actors or certain things that happen during the production of Doctor Who. All I can hope for is that lessons do get learnt, um, and people are treated fairly. People are respected, and you go into these, obviously outside looking in, you're going into these with fresh face, fresh ideas, and wanting to make something special, and you don't want that tarnished with like a horrible experience. So in conclusion, should you go and watch this documentary? As a whole, I would probably say yes. I wouldn't say go out your way to find it. If you just happen to watch it and you've got a spare hour or so, yeah, give it a go. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's good that they had past companions and past script editors and stuntmen that was affiliated with Doctor Who chatting about this type of stuff. I did like Fraser Hines' sort of positive spin on it of like, you know, Doctor Who made me travel to various places around the world: New Zealand, Australia, Cleethorpes. Thanks for the nice little pop for Cleethorpes there, Mr. Hines. And yeah, they kind of very briefly, within a minute, sort of like, you know, what Doctor Who means to them. Nicola Bryant saying, yes, there were some bad times, but the good times outweighed all of that in a nutshell. So I wish it was a bit more fair balanced in that sort of things, and sort of like go for what was more what has gone right for Doctor Who. So let me know in the comments below your thoughts to the Secrets and Scandals of Doctor Who documentary. Have you watched it? Will you be watching it? And what secrets or scandals or facts about this from Doctor Who that you did know or you did not know? Let me know in those comments. Let's keep it all tasteful and respectful though, especially as we're celebrating 60 years of Doctor Who. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please like, share and subscribe. Hit the cloister bell for more notifications. Come say hello and follow me on Facebook and X, and do check out my other fantastic Doctor Who related content on the Timey Wimey Review TikTok page and right here on the Timey Wimey Review YouTube channel. And as a good doctor once said, but not in the name of the Doctor.